First of all, I mean, you know, I'm a little nervous because they're videotaping me, and anyway, but it's a privilege to be back here. I presented across the country at various conferences, and this is my first time back to present in Hawaii since I left in 1988 to move to California, where my husband's family is, and we ended up in Napa, and yes, my house did not burn down, so I was able to be here today. I want to find out who you are. So how many of you are teachers? Okay, how many of you are administrators? Okay, how many of you are parents? Everybody should raise their hands, right? And who are the others of you that didn't raise your hand for parents or teachers or administrators? Counselors, yes. Support staff. Coordinator of? Many things. Oh, you're one of those. Yeah. Okay, how many of you are in private or parochial schools? Okay, how many in public schools? Okay, good. John, that gives you a sense. All right, so I want to do a little bit of disclaimer. You know, I got my training, my formative years at Our Lady of Sorrows School, which is a terrible name for a school. And I landed there after I didn't get a job in the DOE, you know, went to University of Hawaii and got my degree. I was ready to tackle the world. I was of that generation, we were gonna save the world, right? In the 60s and all that. And I didn't get hired. And I ended up at Sister Joan's school, and that left turn in my life changed my entire life. And so I'm back here now after having taught there 15 years and then went to the mainland. And my last 18 years have been the principal of a first charter school in Napa and one of the first 100 in California. And now in my retirement, I made a promise to Sister Joan that I would take her program of really bringing wisdom to students. Because she saw them enter in kindergarten, leave in 8th grade with knowledge and skills, but very little wisdom about themselves and about their relationship with others. We didn't know to call it back then social emotional learning. There wasn't even the concept of that. But she was just so ahead of her time. Before I begin talking a little bit about the program, I want to say a little bit of a disclaimer. So most conferences, they say, you know, when you present, make sure you give something where the audience will take away some little tool or trick in the strategy, or I'm not going to give you that. And the reason is I'm going to concentrate on your beingness as you deliver curriculum, your beingness as you deliver that new toolkit strategy. Because kids recognize when we adults do not walk the talk. And you knew that growing up, right? It's really important that we do this work around social emotional learning and school climate. And I'm so pleased to see all of you here because I know how important this is. And the reason I know how important this is because of this. There is an epidemic of our students across the country not doing well. Student well-being, anxiety, depression has gone up. 2 years ago, suicide was the 3rd leading cause of death in our country. Earlier in this year, it became the 2nd leading cause of death in our country. So just recently, 2 weeks ago, the New York Times ran an article called "Why Are More American Teenagers Than Ever Suffering from Severe Anxiety?" So it is showing up everywhere. So 30% of kids are not completing their first year of college. Now, some of that has to do with financial, but a lot of it has to do with they're not able to handle the stresses of college life. Resiliency is a concern of many colleges. They call it an epidemic. Visits to the counseling offices have skyrocketed. In my district, or in my county, Napa County, here we have the Healthy Kids Survey. And just take a look at those statistics for 11th graders in this particular district. So it's really concerning for me, even though I'm retired. You know, I'm not retired because my passion is around the well-being of kids. In my district, we had 2 teen suicides in the space of 8 days last year, and it just rocked our community. So I'm involved in a lot of work related to how do we relieve stress and anxiety for kids, and it's an enormous problem. And I was so shocked to find out, I already said that, oh, you can see what UCLA found out. 18% felt overwhelmed. By 2010, or in last year, it's 40%, 41% in UCLA. I was shocked to find out, and did you know this? That adolescent suicide is #1 in this state? I did not know that. I was just so shocked that young people in Hawaii, that's the leading cause of death. And what are we doing about it as a community? Thank goodness what's happening now is that we have a lot of people now paying attention. Nationwide, there's a movement about social emotional well-being. This report just came out 2 months ago from Aspen Institute talking about the relationship, how social and emotional parts of who we are inextricably tied to learning. So it's not this separate silo of, you know, whether it's the program you use for School Connect or First Step or Second Step, it has to be integrated and considered in every learning situation in a school. So what they also found out that when you have a healthy school climate, as Joan, some of you were in John's session earlier in the morning, talking about how that contributes to academic achievement, and then of course social emotional skills and well-being. Castle produced this study taking kind of analysis of 213 studies that showed that if you pay attention to social emotional learning in a school, academic achievement will go up an average of 11 points. Now, how many of you are using a social emotional program in your school? Okay, what are you using? A program? PBIS. Second step. Anybody else? Toolkit? Okay, so this is what they found out. Okay, this is John's correlation between school climate survey, which you have some information there if you're interested in having that survey done in your school. I've worked with a couple of schools that have used it, and it's very powerful data to look at the health of your school in terms of the climate. Castle just came out with a publication earlier this year. To reach students, you have to teach the teachers. And what they found out is an off-the-shelf kind of curriculum is not enough. And the study showed that it's because not the teacher's fault that they can't really do it well. They haven't been prepared in their credential programs. Neither have the administrators been prepared in their credential programs to be able to know how to do social emotional learning well in a school. And the couple of schools that I've worked with, the administrators are so committed to this, but they don't know how to do it. So the other piece of it, they're saying, is that it's really important that you have the social emotional learning of the teachers. My mentor, Sister Joan, said you don't just teach subjects, you teach who you are. So that whole thing of the growth of the teachers modeling the very things that you're teaching the students has to be a critical aspect of a really good social-emotional implementation. The third part of what they're talking about in the school is the hidden or implicit curriculum by the school climate and culture. There are lots of messages coming to students constantly all day. If they learn something in the social-emotional learning class, and then it's counteracted in the rest of their day by other teachers, by what they see in the playground, by the way that they're treated when they make a mistake, then it doesn't support the real learning that needs to happen for students. Okay. So our program, Awakening Wisdom, when it began at Our Lady of Sorrows, and then we started our own school called Hoʻala, and Hoʻala in Hawaiian means awakening of the self. But trying to teach this to mainlanders who don't know how to pronounce Hoʻala, or to remember it, or to even type it because it has the glottal stop and has the kahako over the A, we have to change the name. So we combine Sister Joan's desire for wisdom with Hoʻala's meaning awakening to come up with Awakening Wisdom. Now our program deals with those two parts of the three parts of a social-emotional implementation. It can go with most off-the-shelf curriculum, but it deals with how to get teachers to grow in their own social-emotional capacity, to be able to do this with their students. And then it also, John, can you help with that? Why does it do that? Okay, anyway, I'll let you handle that. So what we're trying to do now is, in my retirement, and my promise to Sister Joan before she passed away in 2009, is that I would be sharing this with you. It's too valuable, and I saw in my 15 years at Hoʻala School and my 18 years at River School in Napa, tremendous transformative changes in students and families. So it's, I don't want to be hoarding that, I want to be sharing it. Sister Joan, this is a picture of her. This was at her retirement party, is that right, Nancy? Nancy Berry in the back replaced Sister Joan as head of school at Hoʻala School. And she used to say, we talk funny. And what she meant by that is that there's a way of speaking that embodies the values that John talked about in his session, the values and the mindsets that show up in the way we speak. She used to use this example, "Don't shout," as a not so good example of the double messages that are coming off of behaviors in schools and structures in schools that really confuse students, because there's the behavior and then there's the words, and which is much more powerful is the modeling that we do, and you all know that. A quick story, one of the students who graduated from Hoʻala School was going off to college, but before he went off, he had some time, so he was helping with the after-school program. And a parent was there to observe him and the way that he interacted with kids. So he was dealing with some little disciplinary thing with these, 5 and 6-year-olds after school, and the parent came over and said to Casey, "I want to learn to talk like you." And so what I'm going to do today is really give you a sense of what that is in two scenarios. Because it's really hard to talk about our program in terms of this is the recipe you can use, because I could give you the recipe, and if you didn't embody the mindsets and the values, it would be very empty and the kids would know it. So the two scenarios have to do with, let's see, academic conferences. Okay, How many of you do student-led conferences? Okay, the rest of you do parent-teacher conferences. Okay, I want you to think about a parent-teacher conference that you do. My first experience of doing a parent-teacher conference was after I moved from Hawaii to California. I was teaching at an intermediate school in El Monte, and it was the big cafeteria, 10 minutes. All the teachers were in the cafeteria, lined, on the chairs and the benches, and we were going in 10 minutes, and then another parent would come in. Is that kind of like your experience? So what I want to do is really talk to you about student-led conferences and the way they were run at my school. And I want you to pretend like you're parents, okay? And I want you to think of, as you're listening to the way that I kind of set up the conference, what are the messages coming to the students? Okay, so you're gonna, how is this different? What messages is sent to students, and what's the value? Everybody ready to play parents? Okay, so good afternoon, parents. Thank you for coming in. I know this is a commitment to, take off from work and come in. And as you notice, there are several of you here. We have groups of tables around, and you're going to be seated at one of these tables, and we're going to run this conference. Do you have any questions before we begin? I asked her to role play for me. Yes?
Why did you switch from parent-teacher conferences to student-led conferences?
Excellent. So the reason we do that is because we want to empower students. We want to have them feel like this is their learning. We want them to learn that sense of intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation. And we want to send them a message that we trust them to be able to put together their own conference. They've been spending about 2 weeks getting ready to do this. They have their agenda. We ask you to, ask them questions. Now, unlike the conferences I ran when I was in public school in Southern California, this conference could go on for an hour because they have a lot to say to you, and they don't often get an hour of your time where they are the ones speaking and you are listening. So they're going to have you get out of your seat and maybe go over to the math class to show a project they're doing, the art class to show a project they're doing there. You'll be asked to write a reflection. They've written to you a letter about what are their strengths, what are they focusing on, what are their goals, what do they need to work on as part of the conference. Okay, I'm gonna cut. Okay, so would you turn to someone either behind you, next to you, and just answer these questions. How is this different? What are the messages coming to students? And what's the value of doing conferences this way versus just parent-teacher? And I want to give you this image before you do that. Can you imagine yourself sitting in your principal's office, or maybe your superintendent's, I don't know, those of you who are administrators, and having the superintendent come in and talk to the principal about your performance? And you don't get to say anything. Well, that's what happens to kids. Okay, so talk to each other for a couple of minutes about what are the messages coming to kids and why is that of value. Okay, can you come back? Nancy, am I on time or I'm behind? Okay, good. So how is it different? Obviously it's different, but what are the messages coming to students when they're sitting in a conference in which they are in charge of that conference? And what's the value of that? What do you get out of doing it this way? Usually takes about a week for the kids to kind of gather all their stuff, They have a kind of an agenda to follow. They have to write out their letter. They have to do their reflection. So there's a lot of work and thought going into that. Okay, come on. Who's going to be brave enough?
There's ownership of work, and then also just, I think, a really strong connection of what they're doing at school, and then their ownership of that, and then presenting that to the connection to home.
So how many of you would agree that that would be something you would see as a value? Okay. Anybody else? What else do you think is value about? Yes, Darlene? Yeah.
Student voice, and being able to reflect on what their strengths, their goals, and what they need to work on are, so it makes them think about it and identify with it versus where the teacher just telling the parent.
Correct. Everybody heard her say, okay. So why is student voice important? Just think about you as if you were teachers. I'm assuming administrators weren't once teachers. And if you had no voice and the administrator made all the decisions, well, kids are not that different. That whole need to be heard and considered. Sister Joan said that, how you empower students is you listen to them, you take them seriously, even though their ideas are harebrained. You don't just brush them off, but you take them seriously, and you make them feel like they are needed. So we heard Zoe Wheel talk about that during lunch. Those kids feel like they matter because they're going to make a difference in our world. Okay. Now, John, you want to say your little point?
I wanted to share something because this came up a couple days ago with the conversation with a teacher at a school, and I've heard the people who do this, they'll say the first time, imagine how it goes, handing over the control of conferences to students the first time. It's so everybody has to commit to it and go through that first time, and then the second time it goes a little better. By the third time, it goes really well, and everybody goes, we'll never go back. But so this teacher, they had a presentation, and someone said exactly that thing. By the third time, it was great, and they were basically selling it to the school. And then the teacher went up to the principal and said, well, so are we going to do this? And she goes, well, why don't you try it yourself and see how it goes, and then if it goes good, then you can kind of share with other people. So as an administrator, what's going to happen? What's our prediction of that? What's going to happen at this school after that presentation? Probably nothing, right? So, because there really is no way to do this. It's like it's all or nothing. Everybody's got to go in and live with that transition, or else it just isn't going to happen because the transition is going to be too much. It's going to be too different, and it's going to be too messy.
And there are some teachers, and maybe you were in the room, who did this anyway. You did it on your own because you knew that what kids needed was to feel like they had some power. And I think, a lot of the stress and anxiety that kids are feeling today is because they don't feel powerful. And they don't feel in charge and passionate about what they're learning. Okay? And so all the stuff of this conference and what I'm hearing is just music to my ears, because we really need this for the well-being of our kids. They're literally dying because they don't feel that sense of empowerment. Okay, so this next scenario is discipline. Everybody has to deal with discipline, no matter you're a public school or a private school or a parochial school. And I was middle school, so kids in middle school make a lot of mistakes. So I'm going to now, John's going to play the student, demonstrate to you the way I did conferences in my school. And I'm going to talk about the core values of Awakening Wisdom that really contributes to the way we do things, like StudentLed Conference, like discipline, after that. Okay, the scene is this. Juan, 7th grade boy, and this is an actual student of mine, took somebody else's cell phone out of the PE locker. That probably is a common thing, right? Stealing other people's cell phones. So he took it home. He was dared to do this by his friends, and so he did it. Went home with the phone. His father found it knew it wasn't his, and brought his son to school, which was amazing. Okay, you know, he could have just kind of blown it away or hidden it, but he brought his son to school. And so that's a situation, and John's going to play Juan. Okay, so Juan, you've been brought to school because your dad found this cell phone in your possession, and he knew it wasn't yours. And we're going to go through a process that we use here at River School, and this is what we're going to do. Okay, you see that little sign up there? And this was posted in my office next to my desk. And it's really important that we go through each of these steps so that you are able to move on. You don't have guilt, or you're trying to hide it, or any other kind of emotional baggage left over. Okay. You notice, Juan, that I am not angry at you about this. Do you notice that?
Thank you.
Okay. And I usually say that to the kids. You know why I'm not angry at you?
My dad's angry at me.
Oh, but I'm hoping to model before him, because he's sitting here, why it is I'm not angry. Middle schoolers make a lot of mistakes, and actually the mistakes are really valuable because this part of your brain right here is called the decision maker, or the prefrontal cortex, and we can think of it like a computer. All these mistakes you're making are going into there, and as long as you're learning from it, by the time you're 25, hopefully you're going to be having less problems, you're not going to get into trouble, all those kinds of things. Okay, so that's why we go through this process. Thank you very much. Okay, so the first step, okay, acknowledge your mistake. So most of the students come in here and they really kind of own up to having done what they did. Okay, so are you willing to own your mistake? I did it. Without blaming others and making excuses, lying, or justifying. And do you know why that's really important?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. Why is it important?
Because you want me to appreciate that I made a choice and it wasn't a good choice.
Yeah, and that's kind of an important lesson, don't you think? And the moment you start blaming other people, you've given your power away to that other person. Okay? So I want you to have the power to make good choices. Right? So are you willing to own up that this is what you did?
I did it. I did it.
Okay, thank you. So now you're going to clean it up. Are you willing to clean it up with Jacob?
Sure.
Okay, do you know what that cleanup looks like?
Well, he's got his phone back, and it wasn't that big a deal. It was just a day.
Well, this is true. To you, it wasn't a big deal. Do you think it might have been a big deal to Jacob?
Yeah. I feel bad now that I think about it.
Okay, thank you.
Not at the time, but now I do.
Okay, so what we're going to do, and we're not going to do it now, is we're going to have what we call a clearing. That's one of our other processes. And we're going to have you sit and face each other, and we're going to have a conversation. Okay? And maybe out of that, you can share what you learned through this process. Okay, so we're going to keep on going. Okay, so then the next step is to accept the consequence of your choice. We're not going to go over that part because it's going to take a little long, but that would be one of the questions, and we would go over what are the consequences. Okay, so this step, learn from it, is so important. There's two questions I want to ask you. Learn from it so it's less likely to happen again. What did you learn from this mistake so it's less likely to happen again? And this is a question that I added probably about 5 years ago, and it's very important. What did you learn about yourself? So, I know this is a hard question to answer right now, and you have to think about it. So what I want you to do when you come back in 2 days, I want you to write me a letter and answer those two questions. Are you willing to do that? And then we'll continue on with the other steps. Okay, I'm going to cut. So how is this discipline process different from what you all do in your school? What are the messages being taught to Juan and other students? And what is the value of doing discipline this way? And then I'm going to read you Quans Letter. Okay, can you turn to somebody real quick and for 2 minutes, just kind of what are the messages, what's the value, and then we'll come back and talk. So what do you think? This is what I would do with every student that came into the office that, for some really big, they got into a fight or their sexual harassment or whatever it is. This is the way I dealt with students. And I would say 95% of the time, it was calm, it was very empowering. When I ask kids why do they lie when they usually get in, they make a mistake, they say, well, we don't want to get in trouble. And what they mean by that is not that they're going to have the consequence. They don't want their parents to be mad at them, their teachers to be mad at them, and so forth. So that's why my calmness is really important, so that they can see it's really okay to make mistakes. That's normal for adolescents across the world. This is a time where the adolescent brain is going berserko. No, there are just many more connections of dendrites. You've probably heard about all of this already. And the mistakes are really critical to them getting access, all of that learning in there. You notice that 25 is the age when people can rent cars. Actuarial tables at age 25, they go down. It's because this part of the brain is still being developed, and the mistakes are ways that kids can learn from their mistakes in a safe environment, so it sticks with them. So, what are your thoughts? Oh, come on. My students, come on, somebody, yes, thank you.
Well, I was just telling Nicole that we have gone away from the traditional discipline thing, and we've gone to restorative justice. So we are now, we've got people trained, and so we're bringing in circles, and we're bringing kids together that have conflict to try to get to the root of the conflict before it escalates to anything more serious.
Right.
So that's a different approach, and that sounds, you ask a lot of these same kinds of questions.
Right. Somebody told me, and I'm not Catholic, although I taught at Our Lady of Sorrow School, but somebody told me years later that this is the rite of reconciliation, and I don't know if that's true, but if you are Catholic. Okay, so anybody else? What do you think? What are your thoughts? What are your values? What are the values? Yes?
I was very pleased to see that portion of your list that had forgive. Sometimes that portion is missing in a traditional school where we're just quick to say, hey, this is the consequence for what you did, and we have it all kind of lined up,
Oh, yeah.
class 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is, but the idea of having a closure, that lesson, what you can learn from this experience, that part very, I think is very excellent.
Thank you. It really, and it took me a while to develop this over time, because I really didn't, most discipline systems, they have detention. Do you have detention at your school? Well, it didn't change behavior. And I thought, why are we keep doing this if it doesn't change behavior? The kids are just sitting there, nobody's talking to them, there's no reflecting going on. In order for kids to learn, they have to reflect. And since they're not, with their adolescent hormones, they need a guide. And that's my role in really helping them to look in and see what it is they learned about themselves. Anyone else? Yes.
One of the things about this kind of a model or whatever is, I'm assuming your teachers in the school also understand the model and are utilizing it because there's many discipline issues in the classroom that don't come to the principal, so the model should be consistent. Do you have a parenting component also, because one of the things is seeing parents in the same mindset so that they're raising, it kind of helps them with parenting.
Sister Joan used to do parenting classes, and my children grew up in her school, so I went to the parenting classes. And then when I became a principal at River School in Napa, I continued that because I knew that the power of the parenting is much more powerful than what we do at school. And so we had to be aligned. To the extent that parents bought into that because they understood this is the nature of adolescence, you know, and it wasn't that your child is being rude or, you know, disrespectful. I mean, they may be, but it's part of them pushing, which is normal. You know, we all did that when we were growing up. So it is that's why it's a system. It's not just this little off-the-shelf kind of curriculum that we're going to teach kids in social emotional learning class once a week or once a day.
Can
Yeah.
you kind of address, I mean, one thing that struck me is that what you were modeling to us was that, and it's part of the Awakening Wisdom idea, is that it's not just about the teacher going through a process. It's about an intention that you're talking about. Why are you calm? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? So your intention was the higher level of consciousness that you're trying to raise your teachers. It's not just that you want them to go through this process every time there's something bad happens,
Yeah. Because
they wouldn't necessarily have that same intention or that kind of trying to be above that kid's triggers or whatever they are. So could you talk about how the Wiccan Wisdom tries to help raise the kind of the intentions at the school and consciousness?
So what I did, we had 2 faculty meetings a month. So one was focused on the explicit curriculum, whether it's math or whether it was project-based learning. We were a New Tech Network school or any of that kind of stuff. But the other one was focused on Awakening Wisdom. So we taught teachers how to listen. We taught teachers about their buttons and to recognize their buttons and to look at what was the source of their buttons. Okay? It's not the student. It's your button, because another teacher may not react the same way. So I want to read to you what Juan said in his letter, because Nancy's raising her hand. I learned that I should think about my actions before I do anything. I also learned that there are consequences for what I did, that I don't want to ever get those consequences again. I also learned that I can't lie to my parents, so it's better to just tell the truth. What I learned about myself is that it is easy for me to be influenced. I would always say that I wasn't ever going to let anyone influence me, but now I know that it's harder than I thought. So, I could have told him all of this, and it would have gone in one ear and out the other in a week. But because he wrote this, it's his, and the lesson is his. So that kind of reflection, deep reflection, has to be part of what we do with kids. Okay, I am late and behind, so now, in a school, there's the external part of the school, there's the internal part of the school. There's the individuals and there's the school organization. Like an iceberg, this is what we see, but the power comes from what we cannot see. And really the source of that are the mindsets, or as John says, the references, the values, all of that. When I listen to Zoe at lunchtime, it's presuming a lot of values, okay? So if you have not worked with the staff and looking and owning those values before you start instituting her solutionaries, I think that's what she said, Congress, or whatever the new term is, then it will not be congruent. John has this term, LA Unified is very concerned about congruency. Everybody buys these curriculums and then pretty soon it's a mishmash because they're not all aligned. That's what Awakening Wisdom does, is to, focus on the mindsets, and we use these 4 core values as the guide, the compass. Let me just see. where it brings coherence to every part of the school. Every decision we make, every teacher we hire, every curriculum we look at, every procedure comes back to, is it really showing, promoting responsibility, seeing yourself as cause instead of victim? Just think about that. Seeing yourself as cause instead of victim. Our society has so many modeling of victim, 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 right? We're blaming everybody. And what the power comes from is when we recognize that we have choice. And that's one of the important lessons we have to teach students. Otherwise, they grow up to be victims. Secondly, we need to be respectful, and we don't mean being nice, although that's part of it, but it's honoring the decision-making powers that each of us have. I will not disrespect, I will not make decisions for Deborah that are appropriate for her to make. I will respect myself by not allowing her to make decisions for me that are appropriate for me to make. Now, where this is tricky, if you are parents with children, how many of you remember, maybe you're older and your children are older, where the temper tantrum in the store or the restaurant, and how you cave in and get your child at whatever the thing they were screaming and yelling at them. Oh, you did not do that. Okay, good. Good for you. That's a really tricky area. And I think, disrespect kids a lot. When we are, as parents, we hear the term helicopter parenting, where the kids are just so directed and shaped in their whole life. We had Challenge Success come to our school from Stanford, and they talked about what a high schooler's day looks like, from morning to the evening, where they're just being tugged at from each teacher, the chorus teacher, the PE teacher, whatever, the coach, after school activity. And we really do need to respect them by allowing them to make some decisions. The third is being resourceful, and that means open to possibilities. How many of you have sat in a faculty meeting, you're discussing an issue, and you have a naysayer in there, and pretty soon all of the energy in the room goes down? Okay? So this is a really, really important one in terms of empowering organizations to work effectively. Now the last one I think is really the one that I like the best, because it's for what purpose? What purpose do we take responsibility, honor and respect others' decision making, being open to possibilities? And the fourth R is being responsive. That means to act with compassion for the good of the whole. And that's where this mindset shift program works very well with what our two speakers said about, we need to make a better world for all. Okay? Now, I want to talk a little bit about this. This is the kind of, I can't go into detail. There's so much I could tell you about, and I'll tell you about the Summer Institute we're doing next summer, that you can get more information. But this is sort of the linchpin of the 4 R's. When you can see yourself as cause instead of victim, you have power. I read the book, Stephen Covey's The 8th Habit. Did anybody read that one? Okay. That book says the 8th habit is finding your own voice and inspiring others to find theirs. But he says that our greatest gift is in between an event and a response is a space. And that space is our greatest power, the freedom to choose our response. How many times with our buttons we react? How many times do students, if somebody, she looked at me funny, right? That's what middle schoolers, girls. And there's this whole drama that ensues. Instead of that pause, we need to teach kids and ourselves about, wait, this look. He actually got that in the book, The Eighth Habit. I don't know if you remember reading it. He pulled this idea off a shelf, a little book, at the University of Hawaii Library. And the book he doesn't mention, but I recognize it, is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And I thought this is really powerful. When I was visiting Hoʻala School last year, I wanted to kind of show you the difference in the language of responsibility. Less effective language is on the left. More effective is on the right. On the left, there are essence of victim. On the right, you're saying, okay, what can I do? Being resourceful, open to possibilities. So that's the impact that the 4 R's has on the language in the school and in the culture. When I was at Hoʻala School last year, this was pinned, and I thought this was perfect to describe responsibility. When you think everything is someone else's fault, you will suffer a lot. When you realize that everything springs only from yourself, you will learn both peace and joy. So that is what Awakening Wisdom is about. There's so much more to the program that I don't have time. I want to give 5 minutes for questions, and then I want to end with 2 quotes, one from a parent and one from a student. So, questions. I've just stunned you in, and it's causing you to pause and think, and I hope that's what's happening out there. But do you have any questions or reactions or thoughts?
More functional question, but will your PowerPoint be available?
Yes. Email me and I will send it to you.
Do you have emails on this?
Yeah. Yes.
Has this been applied in cases where there's gang violence, or like there's larger IDPs deal with one person, there's like a huge riot and fight that happened every week in school?
So in my retirement, I looked for a school because my charter school was not like that, okay? And so I looked for a school, and I found a school of at-risk kid students, which is the county office court and probation schools. So I worked with them. I'm working with their aides again this year, but this is the last stop for those kids. They've been kicked out of the district. They're either on probation, have discipline issues or tardy issues. And because there's so much work on the culture of love and care, when you walk on that campus, it's really, and not that kids don't bring, sometimes drugs to school and all that, but they love being at the school because it's one of the safe places for them. Yeah. So it's possible to change it, but leadership is required for that. And that's the key, is working with the director of the school has made all the difference in the world. Yeah.
Is that a large school? Has it been applied in, like Hawaii has large high schools where there's just volumes of students and there's like ovaries and facilities, right? So I'm just wondering, is that a smaller school?
It is a smaller school. But I'm going to tell you something, and this is part of what you would learn in our professional development modules on discipline. Kids act out when they're needy, when they have a need for belonging, and when they have a need for self and integrity and autonomy. When that's out of whack in a school culture, you're going to have kids acting up. Okay? And so those kind of schools you're talking about, it's a major shift and commitment, but it can happen. I really believe that.
I believe it too. But I'm also thinking like there are some schools that have, 40% of their teaching staff leave every year, right? And so how do you create that kind of change in climate when there's like huge shifts?
The other benefit is not just the kids, You're not going to have teacher retention because at my school in Napa, nobody wants to leave the school. You know, and when there's an opening, I mean, the last opening we had, when I was there must have been 16 applicants. And, you know, ours is a small school, but people want to be there because it is a place where teachers also, their need for belonging and their need for autonomy and voice is honored also. You can't do the thing with the kids and not do that with the teachers. Okay, so, okay, Nancy's reminding me. If you're interested in our Summer Institute, Nancy back there has a sign up. You're not committing if you're signing up. We just want to, this idea just came up as a result of being here. And we're going to do a Summer Institute in California, but then we thought, well, why don't we do it here if we have an interest? So if you're interested, please sign up there, take one of the flyers, and hopefully we'll make it all work. So I want to end with, oh yeah, there's the Summer Institute. This quote from a mother at Hoʻala School. Her daughter was graduating, and she said, from this small Wahiawa school where cooperation means more than competition, and listening and clearings are skills actually taught and valued, I believe that the leaders of the world will spring. And this is from my school. A student, 8th grader, was speaking at the 8th grade promotion. And I don't use, you know, GPA to figure out who's going to speak. I just invite kids who want to speak at your 8th grade promotion. Usually have 5 students. Student had been going around from middle school to middle school, and she landed at our school. And I was just blown away by this sentence in her promotion speech. School brought out my ability to be self-reliant, to be myself, to question the world, and be brave enough to fail as a part of learning to succeed. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, you know, we get into education for, right? It's like if we can have that kind of impact on one student, it's like, yes! Thank you very much for coming, and I really appreciate all the hard work you all are doing. Hawaii is very dear to me, and I want to do what I can to support you and the children of Hawaii. Okay, thanks.